Welcome to One Wrong Move, where one small decision set the whole chain in motion. Today's story starts with a government deciding a bird was the enemy, and ends somewhere nobody saw coming. Beijing, spring 1958. A child on a rooftop with a slingshot. An old woman on the next roof with a wok and a ladle. Somewhere across the city, a rifle fires into an empty sky. The whole city is banging on something. Pots, pans, woks, ladles, drums, gongs, tin sheets, metal buckets, firecrackers going off in coordinated volleys. Red flags wave from every roof. The noise is constant. It has been constant since dawn. Every block has been given a signal and a roll. The birds can't land. They fly until their hearts give out. They fall by the thousands. 2 years from this morning, between 15 and 55 million people will be dead of starvation. And one academic study will later look at what happened here. It will imply nearly 2 million excess deaths from the anti-sparrow campaign. This is the story of the day a country declared war on sparrows. February 12, 1958. The People's Republic of China formally launches the Four Pests campaign. It's part of something bigger. The Great Leap Forward, Mao Zedong's plan to turn a farming country into an industrial superpower in 1 generation. Backyard steel furnaces in every village. Forced collectivization. Grain quotas nobody can meet. And alongside all of that, a public health campaign to kill 4 enemies at once. The 4 pests are rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows. 3 of those are ordinary targets. Rats carry disease, flies carry disease, mosquitoes carry disease. Nobody argues. The 4th one is the mistake. Why sparrows? Because farmers had been complaining for years that the birds were eating their grain. The specific bird is the Eurasian tree sparrow, small, brown, common everywhere. Somebody in the ministry did the arithmetic. Each bird, they said, ate about 4 kilos of grain a year. Multiply 4 kilos by hundreds of millions of birds, and you get a number that sounds like a national emergency. State propaganda turned the sparrow into an enemy of grain. Posters went up in every province. School kids chanted slogans about the 4 pests on their way into class. Newspapers ran cartoons of fat sparrows eating peasant grain. The quote doesn't matter. The directive does. And it carries the one thing nobody in the room had really checked. They asked what the sparrow ate. They didn't ask what else it ate. A sparrow eats grain. A sparrow also eats locusts. It eats rice borers and grasshoppers and beetles and caterpillars. The bird was doing 2 jobs in the ecosystem. The planners only counted one of them. There was a warning. A Chinese biologist named Zhu Shi spoke up. He told the leadership there was a historical precedent. An 18th-century Prussian king had once ordered his subjects to kill sparrows. The sparrows were killed. The next harvest was destroyed by an insect plague nobody had seen coming. The Prussians quickly reversed the order. They paid bounties to import sparrows back into the country. Zhu Ji laid the story out. 2 centuries earlier, a European king, an order, dead sparrows, then insects, then a reversed order and paid bounties to bring the sparrows back. He told the planners the same thing would happen in China if they went ahead with the campaign. The mechanism was predictable. The historical record was right there. He was ignored. An ornithologist named Zheng Zuoxin also knew. He'd spent his whole career studying Chinese birds. He knew what they ate. His time would come later. In 1958, nobody was listening to him either. The directive went out. Every household had a target. Children were handed slingshots. Old men were handed nets. Factories stopped work so the workers could hunt sparrows on their shifts. The methods were layered on top of each other. Glue traps in the trees, poisoned grain in the fields. Air rifles, hunting rifles, soldiers firing into the sky with live ammunition. Nests destroyed, eggs smashed, chicks pulled out and killed before they could grow. But the method that made the campaign famous wasn't a weapon. It was noise. The theory was simple. A sparrow can't fly forever. If you never let it land, it will eventually drop from exhaustion. Every rooftop in every city became a station. Every citizen was given something to bang. Pots, pans, walks, ladles, drums, gongs, tin sheets, metal buckets, anything that could make noise. For 3 days, in the spring of 1958, the capital of China coordinated. Beijing, 3 days. The entire population on the rooftops. Red flags waved in waves across the city, passing a signal from block to block. When the flags went up, the banging started. Children with slingshots picked off the birds that tried to perch on lamp posts. Soldiers on cordoned-off streets fired rifles into the air at nothing in particular. Firecrackers went off in coordinated volleys. Megaphones shouted from the tops of buildings. The sparrows of Beijing did what sparrows do. They tried to land somewhere quiet. There was nowhere quiet. They flew from one roof to the next, and the next, and the next. Every roof was a drum. Every window had a face in it. Every lamppost had a child with a slingshot underneath. The birds circled the city looking for an acre of silence, and there wasn't one. The signal moved with them. The noise moved with them. There was no hole in the sound they could slip into. By the end of the first day, they were exhausted. They wobbled on the wing. Whole flocks were seen circling in tight, falling spirals over the courtyards of government buildings. By the end of the second day, they were dying in the air. They dropped onto pavement, onto car roofs, into the laps of children who had been hunting them with slingshots 15 minutes earlier. By the end of the third day, the sky over Beijing was empty. And nobody had stopped to ask why the sky had been full in the first place. If you're still with me, and if you're already wondering how this ends, hit subscribe. The next turn is worse than the one you just heard. Shanghai, a year later, reported over 194,000 sparrows killed in a single day. Nanjing reported similar numbers. Every major city was racking up its own count. By the end of the first year, the official figure was nearly 2 billion sparrows killed. 2 billion in 12 months. In one country. By the time the campaign wound down, the total over 2 years was about 2 billion by the most cited estimates. The Eurasian tree sparrow had been one of the most common birds in China. It was now on the edge of extinction. The campaign had worked. That was the catastrophe. It did exactly what it was designed to do. And then the insects arrived. Spring, 1959. The first reports come out of the provinces. Locust swarms. Bigger than anyone has seen in years. Thick enough to block the sun over a village, loud enough that people can hear the swarm coming before they see it, sometimes covering entire fields in minutes. A farmer walks out at dawn and finds his wheat crop standing, and by lunch the stalks are bare stems. Rice borers in the paddies, grasshoppers in the wheat, caterpillars on the cabbage. The grain the sparrows had supposedly been stealing is now being eaten by something else. And the something else has no predator left. Because the predator is dead. All of it. 2 billion birds dead. The insects eat through the rice. They eat through the wheat. They eat through whole harvests. The biologists who tried to warn the government a year earlier are not vindicated. Nobody is in a position to say they were right. There is only the number of people who are now going to die. Here is what a sparrow does in a field. It lands on a stalk of rice, and it pecks at the seed head. Yes, that's real. That's the thing the farmers saw. Then it hops down into the soil. It eats a grub, another grub, a rice borer larva, a young locust. A pair of sparrows raising chicks will hunt insects almost exclusively for weeks at a time. The chicks need the protein. Remove the sparrow and you don't save the grain. You lose it to an insect the sparrow was holding in check. The whole country had entered a thought experiment with one variable removed. Nobody had tested it. They thought they were taking a thief out of the field. They were taking a guard out of the field. 1959 through 1961. The Great Chinese Famine. The worst famine in recorded human history. Academic estimates of the death toll range from 15 million people on the low end to 55 million on the high end. 15 million is the Chinese government's conservative figure. 55 million comes from the highest independent scholarship. The honest answer is somewhere in between, and we don't know exactly, because the state that killed them was also the state that counted them. The Sparrow campaign wasn't the only cause. The backyard steel furnaces pulled farmers out of the fields at harvest time. Forced collectivization destroyed local knowledge of how to grow food. Lysenkoist farming theories, imported from the Soviet Union, produced false high-yield numbers. Grain was exported while people starved at home. The Great Leap Forward was a compound disaster. Many wrong moves, all at once. But the Sparrow campaign was the cleanest one. The one you could draw a straight line from. One academic study, published in 2025, tried to isolate the Sparrow variable from everything else that went wrong. The researchers modeled the crop yields you'd expect without the Sparrow campaign. They used pest predation rates from regions that hadn't killed their birds. They ran the numbers against the actual harvests during the famine years. The gap between the two is the cost of the campaign, isolated from everything else that went wrong. Their estimate, nearly 20% of the fall in crop production during the famine, can be attributed to the anti-Sparrow campaign. And they imply nearly 2 million excess deaths from it, plus about 400,000 prevented births. Families too hungry to feed themselves don't make children. That is the other side of the same ledger. Nearly 2 million excess deaths because somebody looked at a field and didn't ask what the bird ate. That's the number that matters for this episode. Not the 15 to 55 million total, which has too many causes to lay on one door. Nearly 2 million. One study, one policy inside a much larger famine. If this one made you stop, subscribe. The last beat is the number nobody bothered to count until it was too late. April 1960. The Chinese Communist Party quietly ends the war on sparrows. There is no press conference. There is no self-criticism. There is no statement of any kind. The sparrow simply disappears from the 4 pests list. In its place is a new entry: bedbugs. The campaign had 4 enemies. Now it has 4 different enemies, and the replacement happened without a word. In that same year, the Soviet Union quietly shipped sparrows across the border, about 250,000 live birds, to help restore the population. A country that had just spent 2 years killing every sparrow it could find was now importing them from abroad. The reversal was real. The acknowledgement never came. The man most often credited with ending the campaign is Zheng Zuoxin, the ornithologist. He'd been studying Chinese birds since the 1930s. He knew their diets better than anyone alive. When the famine began, he and other scientists put together the data: stomach contents of sparrows, insect percentages, crop pest predation rates. They took it to the leadership. By 1960, the leadership was ready to listen. The fields were empty, and the people were dying. Zheng Zuoxin lived until 1998. In ornithological histories, he's remembered as one of the scientists who helped end the campaign. He didn't get the credit at the time. The reversal was anonymous. That was the whole point. There was no public admission of the mistake. Not in 1960. Not in 1965. Not ever from the people who signed the original directive. The famine had many causes, and blaming one of them was politically impossible. So the sparrow story became a footnote, a detail in the history of a larger disaster. But the sparrow story is the cleanest version of what went wrong. You can draw the line from the directive to the rooftops, to the empty sky, to the insects, to the empty fields, to the dead. You can't do that with the steel furnaces. You can't do that with the crop reports. The mechanism is too tangled. With the sparrows, you can draw it with a pencil. The decision was tiny. A category entered on a list. a name added to a directive that was otherwise three-quarters correct. Rats, flies, mosquitoes, sparrows. 4 words. 3 of them were fine. The 4th was wrong. And nobody in the country with the authority to change it knew what sparrows ate, not until after the insects came. You can know something is an enemy without knowing what it does when you're not looking. You can run a campaign that works perfectly, and still destroy the thing the campaign was meant to protect. That's the lesson of the 4 pests. Not that Mao was wrong about sparrows, though he was. The lesson is that certainty about a system you haven't studied can kill tens of millions of people. The sparrow was inside a system. The system included insects the sparrow controlled. The planners saw the bird. They didn't see the system, and the country paid for the difference in bodies. 1 wrong move, 1 bird, 1 list. They banged pots and pans until the sky was empty. Then the insects came, and nobody in the country had thought to ask what the birds had really been eating. If this one got you, hit subscribe. 1 wrong move drops a new one twice a week, and the next one is worse.